The stream is up too. Salam. How are you?
What about your son and stuff? He's with his mom?
Yeah, they're on the East Coast.
Oh.
I'm a free man. How unproductive I've been these past few days.
Working on answer key?
Yeah.
On your other websites?
Those less so good.
How many website projects do you have?
Good question.
Like
It's
several.
growing. It's a growing repertoire.
Okay.
Istafada.com, Witcher.fyi.
Istifada?
Istikhara.
Istikhara.com, okay.
No, Witcher.fyi.
Okay.
And then we're creating something called Deen.fyi, which is, it's like, especially in the Bay Area corporate world where you're going for Eid, right? And you're telling your boss, hey, I'm leaving
For
Tuesday
Eid.
or slash Wednesday, whatever it is. But then you can put, like, instead of sending them to Wikipedia, we created just like a one-pager.
Okay.
That explains
Like a
it very
quick.
concisely. Yeah, so Eid.fyi has both
Nice.
Eids on there. We're going to make one for Hajj, so like, how do I explain to my
FYI.
boss I'm going to leave for 2 weeks and come back bald? Yeah, things like that.
I'm going on this pilgrimage. Okay, that's nice. That's really good. And you have the nikah one, right? The nikah one. What is it? 101? Very nice. What's this thing? Great.
When I he shared that one, and it was like, first he asked us to do the personality test, then our love languages, then he shared Nikah 101. I was like, are you setting up a matchmaking program behind the scenes?
You guys did the personality test?
Yeah.
How was it?
I've done that one before.
Okay.
I get the same thing every time.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I just do it as well.
Oh, really? I should guess yours.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look through them again. Or the artsy guy.
Alright, we can start. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. All thanks and praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May His peace and blessings upon His last final messenger, His family, His companions, and those who follow them until the end of times. So throughout the school year, your class was supposed to complete all of the fiqh of tahara and ibadat. So you're supposed to do tahara, salah, zakat, sawm, and hajj, but I believe you only did tahara and salah. So inshallah the plan is through summer we'll get through at least zakat and hajj as well, and perhaps sawm, but zakat and hajj for sure, inshallah. So last week we started our discussion regarding zakat. We talked about the importance, the significance of zakat, right? Some of the rewards and virtues associated with the act of worship, some of the objectives behind it, and we also talked about some of the warnings that come in the Quran and Hadith for those who choose not to pay it. And then we talked about the definition of zakah both linguistically and technically. So we're just going to start really quickly with a review today. So we said linguistically the word zakah, it comes from the word zakatun, zakah yasku zakatun, which can mean purity, growth and increase. So zakah bi ma'na tahara, right? One of the linguistic meanings is tahara itself, and one of the linguistics meanings is an-nama wa ziyada, right? Nama means growth, and az-ziyada means increase. And then technically, the fuqaha, they have come with several different ways of defining zakah, and one of the more comprehensive is the definition that's on the screen, right? It's the transfer of ownership of a portion of wealth to a needy Muslim in such a way that the wealth is completely transferred along with the intention. And the obligation of zakah obviously is established from the Quran, the Sunnah, ijma' as well. And then another more detailed definition that's given, which I don't have on the screen but it's a little bit more detailed, is transferring ownership of an amount of material wealth specified by the lawgiver to a poor Muslim who is neither a Hashimi nor their freed slave, without material benefit returning to the giver in any way, for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. So transferring of ownership, that is one of the most essential components of zakah. That when we pay zakah, right, when we fulfill this obligation, there's an actual transfer of ownership taking place, which means that the wealth, right, that wealth is leaving my ownership and it's entering into the ownership of the recipient. So there has to be what they call tamlik. And all the classical works of fiqh, they give a lot of importance to this concept of tamlik, right, the actual transfer of ownership of an amount of wealth specified by the lawgiver. And that amount of wealth is 2.5%. Right? When it comes specifically to gold and silver, it's 2.5%. When it comes to merchandise, it's 2.5%. And then when it comes to livestock and animals and agriculture, the percentage changes. Right? For livestock and animals, there's all this fun like rules related to it, which we'll read next year in Quduri, inshaAllah. Like for every 5 camels, you have to give a sheep, and for 10 camels, you give this much, etc. MashaAllah. So if we ever go back to like a agricultural society and the world goes to hell, then we can implement all that as well. Alright, and then to a poor Muslim. So zakah cannot be given to non-Muslims. Right? Zakah is specific for Muslims, whereas sadaqah, charity, can be given to anyone who is neither a Hashimi nor their client. So basically they can't be from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. And there was this concept of al-wala, where if a person had a slave and they set that slave free, that freed slave was called a mawla. And the mawla essentially was part of your family. Right? The mawla became part of your family. They were entitled to certain rights that your family was entitled to. You were sort of like responsible for their care and their protection, etc. So that mawla would also be considered to be part of the family then. So the fuqaha, they say that someone from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, or someone who was like a freed slave of that lineage, won't be eligible to receive zakah.
Freed slave specifically of that lineage?
Mm-hmm.
Just freed slave?
Freed slave of that lineage. Alright, without material benefit returning to the giver in any way. So the person who is fulfilling the obligation of zakah cannot benefit from that wealth in any way, shape, or form. For the sake of Allah, obviously the intention has to be there because it is an act of worship, it is in ibadah. Right. Then we highlighted that there are 2 general groups of conditions. Right? There are conditions related to the obligation of zakah that are related to the individual, and those conditions that are related to the wealth itself. So there's a certain set of conditions that if a person meets them, then the zakah becomes obligatory upon them. Right? If a person fulfills these particular conditions, then zakah becomes an individual obligation upon them. But then what type of wealth do they pay zakah on? Right? That wealth has to also fulfill certain conditions. So the conditions for the individual are 5. Right? They have to be Muslim, adult, sane, free, and not in debt. And we talked about the details of these last week. That a person has to be a Muslim, obviously, because it's an act of worship. And acts of worship are only required from people of Iman. They have to be an adult, they have to be baligh, they have to be sane, aqil, they have to be free, hur, and they are not supposed to be in debt. And what they mean by debt is debt that is that encompasses their assets. Basically, their debt is more than what they have. Alright, and then there were 6 conditions related to the actual wealth itself. The first being ownership, that the individual is the sole owner of that particular asset, of that particular wealth. The second is the ability to use. Right, the ability to use, which means that it's in that person's possession. So not only are they the malik, they're also qabid. Right, there's qabd, and possession can be of 2 types. It can be physical possession, where it's in your actual physical possession, or it could also be constructive, where you might not have it with you physically, but you have full access to it. You're able to access it and use it. The third is that the wealth has the ability to grow. And that's the actual sabab for all of the zakatable assets. Right? When we talk about the 5 categories of assets that are subject to zakat, the thing that they share in common is that they all have growth, either intrinsically or real actual growth. They all have the ability to increase. In excess of basic necessities. Basic necessities are defined as an item that is purchased for personal use without the intention of resale. So basic necessities might not be the best translation because it conveys the meaning of like you need it, but it could be something that you don't need as well, but you bought it for personal use and the intention is not to resell it. Alright, the 5th was passing of a year, hawlanul hawl. It's referring to a lunar year. And the 6th is the nisab, that you own the nisab or more. So the minimum amount of wealth that makes zakat obligatory is known as the nisab. And if a person owns the nisab, then they're considered to be wealthy according to the sharia. Right, they're considered to be wealthy according to the sharia, and then because of that they would be required to give zakah. Alright, then we talked about which nisab is supposed to be used, right? The gold nisab or the silver nisab. And most of the fuqaha, most of the jurists and the contemporary scholars, they give the fatwa on the gold nisab. Right? Because if you use the silver, then basically everyone is going to be paying what? Zakah, and barely anyone will be eligible to receive zakah.
I've heard that you can use that it's better to use there's an opinion that you use the silver standard to calculate if you need to pay, and if you qualify to take, you use the gold standard.
So some people say that, but again, it's like the whole wisdom, right? The whole wisdom behind the nisab was that historically speaking, if a person owned 20 dinars or 200 dirhams, that would be enough for them to live for a year comfortably, like take care of themselves and their families for a year. And if you look at the nisab even for gold today, that's like probably enough for a month, right, for most people. So they say that keeping the objectives of zakat in mind and what the actual purpose is and the wisdoms behind it, that you should go with a gold standard. And that is the majority. Right, the majority say go with the gold standard. And that value is going to fluctuate, obviously, because the value of gold keeps fluctuating. So it's important to keep in mind is 87.48 grams of gold or 87.5 grams of gold.
Sheikh, do you check the nisab the day you start and a year later?
Yeah.
So is it possible, let's say my number, I have $3,731. A year later I have the exact same amount, but gold's now worth $3,800. Am I technically not at the nisab anymore?
Technically.
Alright.
Gotta raise the value of gold.
I'm not gonna get like $10 hands off.
Alright, so now what exactly are we paying zakat on? So it is not necessary to pay zakat on every single thing that a person owns. So for example, we said a person's basic personal needs are exempted, which refers to personal items such as the house that you live in. Right? The house that you live in that you own is not a zakatable asset. Furniture that you own, clothing, vehicles, right, equipment that's used for one's profession, or any other personal belongings like books, or I don't know, maybe someone collects comic books, stamps, whatever it is, those will not be subject to zakah.
If someone had other houses for income, would they have to pay zakah on the rent they get?
Yeah, so if it's a rental property, you pay zakah on the rental income. So the rental income is basically added to your assets, right? So you pay zakah on that. If you're in the business of buying and selling homes, then you'd pay on the value of the house because it counts as merchandise then. Alright, so the first asset that's subject to zakat, or we call zakatable asset, is merchandise. And merchandise would be anything that you purchase for the intention of resale. So any non-monetary item, non-monetary meaning it's not gold, it's not silver, it's not cash, purchased with the intention of resale. A person should calculate the wholesale value of their merchandise and count it towards their zakatable assets. And those items that are needed for a person's business but are not merchandise are not subject to zakah. So for example, if I own a bookshop, I have to pay zakat on my earnings and the wholesale value of my books, but I don't have to pay zakat on the shelves and the chairs and the computer, etc. So the merchandise itself, and obviously whatever you earn from that merchandise. And the amount they say is you calculate the wholesale value.
Wait, it's the merchandise itself, and then also what you've accrued over.
What you've earned from it. What you've earned from it. Because obviously that's added to your assets. Whatever cash you've earned. Alright. And this is based off of several ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Samura radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ used to command us to give zakah from what we keep for trade. Alright, so this was an explicit teaching or direction and guidance from the Prophet ﷺ. Merchandise. Alright, the second is cash. Now obviously cash is a more recent something more recent, which didn't exist during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but the fuqaha, according to their understanding, they count cash just like gold and silver. Right? It's considered to be a zakatable asset. So this is referring to dollars, euros, any type of currency that exists, regardless of what form that cash is in. So if that cash is in hand, right, you keep it under your pillow for safekeeping, under your mattress, it's in a bank account, it's in a savings account, checking, retirement, whatever it may be. Right? All of that cash that you have, that you own and you have access to, is subject to zakah. Alright, so regardless of what form that cash is in, whether it's in hand, bank accounts, stock as well. And then when it comes to stock, they make this distinction between stocks that are purchased for capital gain versus dividends. Right? Stocks that are purchased for capital gain as opposed to dividends. They say if a stock is purchased for resale, it is deemed trade merchandise, and zakah is due on it every year based on its market value that year. So if the share was purchased for the purpose of capital gain, meaning one bought it with the primary intention of selling it, then zakah will be due on the market value of the share at the time one is paying zakah. So basically it's treated like what? Like cash. Whatever the value of that stock is, that's subject to zakah. Right, if purchased not for resale but to receive annual dividends, then the stock itself is not deemed an article of merchandise. Rather, one is deemed a co-owner of the company based on one's respective share, and in that case, one pays zakah on all goods and monetary assets of the company, yet may deduct those assets that are not zakatable. For example, company assets for use and not for sale, such as the land, machinery, cars, and the like. This gets complicated. Don't purchase stocks for dividends. Alright, retirement accounts like 401k, IRA, whatever it may be. Alright, those would also be subject to zakah. And it says based on how a 401k is structured, alright, it is clear that the money invested in the fund by both the employee and the employer, along with any gains or profits, is owned by whom? The employee, right? It's owned by the individual. And since it's wealth owned by the individual, it will be subject to zakah, right, as long as the other conditions are met. And since funds cannot be withdrawn from the 401k until the age of 59 and a half without taxes and penalties, zakah will not be due on it until one has unrestricted access to the money. So technically, you don't have to pay on it until you're 59 and what? 59 and a half.
Really?
But then you have to pay for what? All the back years. Make sense?
Could you run that back?
Alright, so since you don't have full unrestricted access, right? If I were to access my 401k today, I'd have to pay taxes and penalties. So they're saying that the only time you have access to that wealth in an unrestricted fashion is when you're 59 and a half. So up till then, you don't have to pay every year. But once you get unrestricted access, you have to back pay it.
Or could you just pay it year by year, subtracting out taxes and penalty?
That's the easiest way. That is the easiest way. And that's the fatwa that we give. That you should pay it every year, but you can subtract the taxes and penalties because that's how much money you would actually have in hand.
For access.
Mm-hmm. Alright, so and the loans are also part of your cash. If you've given someone a personal loan, right, that money is still yours. You own it. You just don't have what to it? Access to it. So that money is also subject to zakah. But then they differentiate between like a long-term loan and a short-term loan, and a loan that you actually expect to receive or you don't expect to receive it back. So if I've loaned someone $10,000, I don't have to pay zakah on it until I actually get it back. But when I do get it back, I have to pay for what? All the previous years. Right? So that's why they say it's better just to pay it every year. Right? It's better just to pay it every year.
How would that be done for the previous years? Like 2.5 from the 10,000 and then 2.5 from whatever follows?
Yeah.
Whatever's remaining?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there going to be a point where you essentially like run out of zakatable money?
A long time.
After a long time.
2.5%.
It's very, very little. Very, very little.
$250.
Alright. Then we have gold and silver. So according to the Ahnaf, right, according to the Hanafis, we say that gold and silver, whatever form they take, they are subject to zakah. Whether that's like coins, raw nuggets, jewelry that's worn or not worn, it doesn't matter. If it's decorative pieces, if it's silverware, all of it is subject to zakah. So any type of gold or silver that a person owns is zakatable. And one of the most common questions that at least we get asked is, specifically by women, is do I have to pay zakat on gold and silver jewelry? Right, that is one of the most common questions that we get every single year. And the answer, it actually depends on what school of thought you follow. If you're Hanafi, then yes. If you're non-Hanafi, then no.
So long as you're using it, right?
As long as you're using it. As long as it's being in use. Alright, so this is a legitimate, this is an issue where there's a legitimate difference of opinion amongst the fuqaha. So jurists from all four schools, right, all four madhahib, whether the Ahnaf, the Malikis, the Hanbalis, the Shafi'is, they agree that if an individual possesses gold and silver jewelry that they use in an impermissible manner, then would be subject to zakah. So for example, if a man has a number of gold chains, a gold earring, and a gold ring that they wear, they would pay zakah on them. Because men aren't supposed to have jewelry. It doesn't matter if they wear it or not. You have gold, you got to do what? Pay on it. Alright, it is impermissible for a man to wear gold jewelry based on a number of different ahadith from the Prophet ﷺ. For example, Ali radiallahu anhu narrates that once the Prophet ﷺ took hold of some silk in his right hand and gold in his left, and he said, "These two are forbidden for the males of my ummah." That's why men don't wear gold, don't wear silk. Alright, similarly, jurists from all four schools of thought agree that if an individual possesses gold and silver jewelry as a collection that they do not wear or use, then it is also subject to zakah. Right? So all four schools of thought, all four madhahib agree that if you have gold and silver jewelry that you're not wearing, you're just collecting it, it's subject to what? Zakah. Right? They collect gold and silver jewelry as a habit or as an investment, and in this scenario the jewelry will be classified as regular gold or silver that has the potential to increase in value and will be subject to zakah. The disagreement arises in jewelry that is worn, such as gold jewelry for women and silver rings for men. Right, that is where the ikhtilaf is amongst the fuqaha. The jewelry that is actually used, that is worn. So according to the what we call al-a'immat al-thalatha, the Malikis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanbalis, right, gold and silver jewelry that is worn is not subject to zakah. And this opinion has also been narrated from companions of the Prophet ﷺ, such as Ibn Umar, Jabir, Aisha, Ibn Abbas, Anas, and Asma radiyallahu anhum. And they base this off of certain narrations from Aisha, Ibn Umar, Jabir radiyallahu anhum, that show they did not use to pay zakah on jewelry that was worn. Right? And they also argue that jewelry that is worn is similar to clothes that are worn or furniture that is used in one's home. So just as no zakah is due upon one's clothes and furniture, similarly no zakah is due upon jewelry that is used. Right? So that would be the position of the jumhur. That is the position of the majority. Right? Which would be again the Malikis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanbalis. But then we have the Hanafis. Right? The Hanafis actually have a very strong argument based on nusus, right? Based off of certain texts. So according to the Hanafis, zakah is due on gold and silver jewelry, regardless of whether it is worn or not. As a matter of fact, they argue that zakah is due on gold and silver in any form, whether it's coins, gold bars, jewelry, utensils, decorative pieces, whatever. And this is the opinion of esteemed companions such as Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhum. So even amongst the companions there was what? Ikhtilaf. So for some individuals to come and try to get rid of the ikhtilaf in the modern era is not possible. This is something that has been disagreed upon for centuries and is going to be disagreed upon for centuries. And each side has their own evidences and proofs and arguments that they can make. Alright, so as can be understood from the above, the issue of zakah on gold and silver jewelry is one that has been disagreed upon since the time of the companions. The proponents of both positions have their respective evidences, proofs, arguments, and counter-arguments, and which we don't really need to get into. And both positions are valid. Right? Both positions are valid, and qualified scholars reserve the right to hold the opinion they feel is stronger. And the average person should follow the opinion of their personal school of thought, if they follow one, or a local scholar or imam whose knowledge and piety they trust. So the fatwa of our teachers, the fatwa of the Hanafi madhab is, you wear it, don't wear it, doesn't matter, you got to pay zakah. And the argument is, the rational argument is that gold and silver carry value intrinsically. So intrinsically they have the potential to increase in value. So that meaning of nama is found in them. And then there's several ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he saw, for example, women wearing bangles. Right? And he asked, oh, do you pay zakah on that or not? And then they said no. So he said, do what? Pay it. And there's other ahadith, there's other narrations as well. Alright, there is no zakah on precious stones. So pearls, diamonds, sapphire, rubies, whatever, there's no zakah on it. Unless you're buying it for resale. Right? Unless it's like merchandise. But if a person has diamonds or whatever, there's no zakah on it. Now the problem that does arise is that if you've been purchasing gold, you don't know how much your gold weighs, if it meets the nisab or not. Right? And oftentimes gold has, like a ring might have a stone on it, right? Or your necklace even might have whatever, diamonds or stones on it. So you're supposed to at least try your best to approximate how much gold is in the jewelry itself. And oftentimes when you purchase it, there's like a little sheet that tells you, or you take it to a jeweler and they'll figure it out for you. Alright, the next is agricultural output. Right, agricultural output. This is referring to what we call ushr. Right, al-ushr is basically 10% of whatever your land produces. The Sahiban, Imam Abu Yusuf and Muhammad rahimahumullah, they were of the opinion that for agriculture there's also certain nisab. Right, there's a certain nisab which was a huge amount. It was like some tons of wheat and whatever. If it reaches that, then you would give 10% of it. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, whatever you grow, you should give what? 10%. Right? Whatever is grown from the earth, you should just give 10% as zakah. Alright, then livestock is referring to camels, cows, and sheep that are meant for grazing.
You said Sahiban, that's the two students of
Good. So nomenclature for the Hanafi madhab we'll learn next year and full on before we start Quduri, but just to start off, right, when you say al-imam, it's Abu Hanifa. Right, when you say Sahiban, it's his two students, Muhammad and Abu Yusuf. When you say Shaykhan, it's Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf. Why are they called Shaykhan? Because they were both teachers of whom? Imam Muhammad. Right, Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf were both teachers of Imam Muhammad, so you call them the Shaykhan. Then you have Tarafan. Right, Tarafan means they're on both sides. The Tarafan would be Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad. And the reason why they're called Tarafan is because on one side Imam Abu Hanifa is the teacher of Abu Yusuf, and on the other side Muhammad is the student of Abu Yusuf. So Tarafan, two sides. So they have Imam, Sahiban, Shaykhan, Tarafan.
Shit, for agriculture, is there like 5% if it's irrigated or something?
Yeah, so if it's naturally irrigated by the sky and you're not watering it yourself, it's 10%. If it's irrigated by yourself, then it's 5%. It's less. So if you put effort into it by irrigating it and stuff like that, it's only 5%. Alright. And since, mashallah, none of us own livestock or agriculture, all we need to take into account is merchandise, cash, gold, and silver. Alright, so the amount of cash we have the value of gold and silver that we have and the value of our merchandise if we were in business, we will add up all those things. If it's more than the nisab, you pay 2.5%. So calculating zakat is not that complicated. For some reason, people make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I think the reason for that is probably just people don't know. Right? People aren't used to it. People don't know. Most calculators online, they're tools. They're not super accurate, but they help. Right? They just plug in numbers and it calculates it for you. So the way to do it again is that if you have nisab, let's say most people pick Ramadan, just because it's easy to remember. It's more it's a month of virtue, and people remember it easier. So if you have the nisab in Ramadan, and then the following Ramadan you have nisab again, you just pay what? 2.5%. I'm going to add up all my cash, whether it's again under my mattress, my wallet, bank account, checking account, savings, retirement, stock, whatever. If I own gold and silver, it's value. I'll add the value to it. If I own merchandise, I add its market value. And whatever that final number is, I pay 2.5%. And in between the year, whatever happens doesn't matter. If it increases, decreases, doesn't make a difference. You just look at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. The only time it makes a difference in the middle of the year is if you go bankrupt, meaning you hit zero. If you hit zero, then you will restart your year once you reach the nisab again. That makes sense?
In regards to merchandise, so for like someone who has a business, they have to calculate like do inventory of the whole thing or an approximate estimate.
They say you estimate the market value, wholesale
Of everything.
All your merchandise,
All
all the
the merchandise.
merchandise.
Market value meaning what it goes for or what it costs.
What it goes for. Like if I were to sell it today at market value, how much would I have?
Okay, and how does
Like
that work?
basically, I think what they say is that if you're to like wholesale everything, like you're liquidating your entire whatever your merchandise, whatever value you get from that, that's subject to zakat.
So like bundling it all together.
Not each individual, like
Yeah. Oh, okay. So like an estimate of everything bundled together. And how would that work?
because each individual, if you're itemizing it, that's like, mashallah. Good luck with that.
And for a year, that would just you'd probably qualify for the nisab. Yeah. So
Most likely, yeah. Most likely. If you have like a store or whatever, you most likely have the nisab in the beginning and the end.
So to clarify, you bundle, and approximate altogether the merchandise that's in your store.
Like say today you're going out of business, you need to liquidate,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to sell everything, whatever that value is, you pay zakat on that. Yeah. All right, and then those are the zakatable assets, and what you can take away from this is your liabilities. So for example, if I'm calculating my zakat for this month, I can subtract any liabilities that I have. So liabilities, for example, could even be some of your bills, gas, electricity. Right? If you got a car payment, you can subtract the car payment. A lot of people, especially living in SoCal, live in debt. I would say the vast majority of people are living in debt. But the fuqaha, in order to give benefit to the fuqara, they differentiate between short-term debts and long-term debts. Right? So a long-term debt is something that is not due up front, and it's a huge amount. So most people who have houses have a mortgage, and that loan amount is going to be like $500,000, $600 million, whatever it may be. And if everyone were to subtract that debt, then ain't nobody paying zakat. As a matter of fact, you could be living, mashallah, in the hills of Diamond Bar and technically be eligible to receive zakat because you're so much in debt. So what they say is that you would only subtract that month's mortgage payment. That is the immediate amount that's due.
So when you were saying that subtract the bills and stuff, that's for that month?
That month only. Yeah, that month. Because the previous months, it's already gone.
Yeah.
But that current month. Make sense? So you can subtract 1 month's mortgage payment, 1 month's car payment.
1 month's all liabilities.
All your liabilities for that particular month. Basically, the month you're paying zakah, because you need to know the final amount of cash you're going to have in hand.
Okay.
And that final amount's going to be after you pay your liabilities for that month.
What's the benefit of calculating it in the beginning of the year?
Just to know if you have nisab or not.
Okay.
Because if you don't have the nisab, then the year doesn't start.
Just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So you say I have $10,000 for the month that I'm gonna pay zakat, and then it's like all my bills come out to 3,000. I would subtract that by zakat. Total would be 7,000.
Yeah, 2.5 of 7,000.
Do you add in your income though? Like
Yeah.
if I know I
Yeah.
get paid the next 2 Fridays of that month,
Yeah,
anyway,
you should add that in.
put it back in.
You should add that in.
So that's from the total amount that you have, right?
Mhm.
And then you're gonna subtract all the stuff that you have to pay for.
Liabilities.
And then you're gonna take out 2.5.
2.5%.
Remaining one. Okay.
So assets minus liabilities, that total number, 2.5% of that. Which for most people is not much. And for most people it's not much. Unless you have, mashallah, a lot in your 401k, then it kind of gets pricey. Alright. Any questions on that? I think the next section is on the recipients of zakah. Mm-hmm.
Question on livestock.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you just give the livestock away, or do you like slaughter and distribute the meat?
No, you just give the livestock away straight up. So again, historically speaking, people lived in very like rural societies, agricultural societies, and a lot of their wealth was in the form of what? Livestock, camels and sheep and goats and cows, etc. So the way that they would collect zakat, specifically during the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and the companions afterwards, and generations afterwards, is that they would differentiate between private wealth and public wealth. Right? Private wealth is wealth that obviously is not public. People don't know about it. That would be your cash, your gold, your silver. Public wealth would be your animals, your livestock, because people can actually what? See it. So the zakat collector from the government was an actual like official position. And they would go to the areas and villages and actually collect livestock. So for example, the nisab for camels is 5. If you own 5 camels, you have to give 1 sheep. Now you got to give 1 sheep, either the sheep itself or the monetary value of that 1 sheep. So the zakat collectors will actually go and collect that, and that will become part of the Baytul Mal, and then the Baytul Mal would distribute it to whoever needed it. Make sense?
And the livestock, there are specific types, right?
Yeah, just camel, cows, sheep, goats. What are all the relatives of sheep and goat? Lamb.
Llamas.
Not llamas. No, not llamas.
Not
Llamas
chickens.
are not chickens.
Ram? No, same thing.
And these
What
are.
is lamb?
What is lamb?
Lamb and sheep?
Yeah. So lamb, sheep,
They're the same thing.
goats. Yeah.
Camel, cow, goat, sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure.
All right. Now the fun stuff.
Controversy.
The controversial stuff.
Ramadan controversy every year.
Every single year. You know, this controversy only exists in America. America.
Some of the stories are unbelievable though.
It's
Yeah, I never imagined.
not just unbelievable, it's kind of like insane.
Yeah.
Let me pull it out. Bismillah.
Actually, here are his articles from Usman Marchik. Yeah, this goes in on it. You can tell a story about whoever those people were. I forgot which guy or something. This guy's paying like 10K for someone's like gala fundraiser. But if you think about 10K in zakat, that's like an entire town's zakat. That is so much money. Like if you have 2,000, if you had $2,000 cash, your zakat was $50. Like how many people's zakat was going to equal $10,000?
There's some people that use zakat funds for like paying the honorariums of speakers and stuff.
The one that got me, it said they use the zakat money to fight Sharia law in another country.
To fight Sharia law?
You remember the Brunei thing or whatever? Like they were
Oh.
just like,
Astaghfirullah. That is horrible. Alright. So the Arabic word for recipients, they call it masarifuz zakat. Right, masarifuz zakat, or masraf would be the singular, masarif is the plural. Right, masarif basically is where zakat can be spent, or who zakat can be spent upon. So eligible recipients of zakat. Right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has specified 8 categories of individuals that are eligible to receive zakat. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has very clearly specified 8 categories of individuals in the Quran who are eligible to receive zakat, and this is from Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. Right? إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. Right? So the fuqaha, based off of this verse, right, and the principles of fiqh that are used to understand and interpret, right, they derive that these 8 categories are specific because the word that's used at the beginning is innama. And innama in the Arabic language is known, it's called kalimatul hasr. It's the word of exclusivity.
Kalimatu?
Hasri. Ha, sad, ra. Ha, sad, and ra. So for example, if I say at-talibu fil fasl, it means the student is what? In the class. If I add innama and say innama at-talibu fil fasl, it makes it exclusive. That only the student is where? In the class. No one else is there. Only the student is there. There's no, if I just say at-talibu fil fasl, there's a possibility of there being other students. There's a possibility of there the teacher. Possibility of, I don't know, the workers being there. But if I put innama in front, it makes it exclusive. That only the student is where? In the class, no one else. So Allah uses the word innama. Right? Innama as-sadaqat, the as-sadaqat, which is referring to zakah. And in the Quran, usually when the word sadaqah is used, it's referring to zakah. Right? It's used interchangeably in the Quran. So sadaqat is only for whom? Lil fuqara. And they say the lam here is also lil ikhtisas. The lam here makes it specific and ownership. So sadaqah or zakah is only for al-fuqara. That's category number 1. Right? Al-fuqara. Category number 2, al-masakin. Category number 3, al-amilina alayha. Right? Category number 4, al-mu'allafati qulubuhum. Category 5, al-riqab. 6, al-ghadimin. 7, fi sabilillah. And 8, wabn as-sabil. So charity is only for the poor, the destitute, workers who collect it, those whose hearts are to be reconciled, slaves, people in debt, in the way of Allah, and the wayfarers. Fariidatan min Allah. Right, this is an obligation, a mandate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu alimun hakim. Allah is the all-knowing, the all-wise. And then each of these categories is specifically defined. Right? Each of these categories is specifically defined. And the understanding of these words, again, like when it comes to interpreting and understanding the Quran, it's not like you just pick up Hansware and you can translate it and you understand it. Right? Words have specific meanings and they were understood within specific contexts. And to have a proper understanding, we would look for, first and foremost, to any explanations of the Prophet ﷺ himself or of the companions and how they understood it, and then how their students understood it and how it's understood historically. Alright, so al-fuqara, right, al-fuqara is translated as the poor, and the word fuqara is the plural of the word faqir. A faqir is a person who owns some wealth, but it's less than the nisab. Right? According to the Sharia, a faqir is someone who owns some wealth, but the amount of wealth they have is less than the nisab. So in other words, this would be an individual who would not have to pay zakah themselves. They don't have to pay zakah, but they're eligible to do what? To receive zakah.
In regards to zakah, is it either you're eligible to pay zakah or you're eligible to receive? There's no in between.
There's another in between. Right, and so there's nisab wujub zakah, and there's something called nisab hirman zakah. And nisab hirman zakah is if you have the nisab from any type of asset, not just the zakatable assets. So if you own the nisab from any type of assets, then you can't receive zakah, but you also don't have to pay zakah. Make sense? So for example, let's say that, when I add all my zakatable assets up together, it comes out to like $2,000. But then I have like, mashallah, 5 cars, right? That I don't need, but I have 5 cars. And if I add the value of those cars, it's going to take me beyond the nisab. Or I have just like $2,000, but I have like a TV in every bedroom, right? And if you add the value of all those TVs together, it's going to go above. So in that case, I don't have to pay zakah, but I'm also not eligible to do what? Receive it.
So, go ahead.
Aren't those cars and those TVs technically excessive or past the bare necessity of, I guess, that person's living situation? So how do you start
assessing that? So it goes off of, historically speaking, the investigation would go, and you'd just go off the word of the person. So it's a system of trust, amana, because this is ibadah, right? And if a person says, yes, I'm eligible to receive zakah, you would take them at face value. You wouldn't need to go, I need your like bank statements and I need this and that. That's like going above and beyond what's required. If they're lying, then that's between them and whom? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sheikh, would you consider receiving the zakat as ibadah as well?
No. But to take wealth that you're not entitled to is a huge sin. Alright. Among the poor, right, when it comes to the fuqara, priority should be given to one's relatives, then neighbors, and then others according to their needs. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the poor person is not the one who asks for a morsel or two of food from others, but the one who has nothing. It is a shame to beg from others. Right. Another version, the Prophet ﷺ says, the poor person is not the one who goes around and asks people for a morsel or two of food or a date or two, but a poor person is one who does not have enough to satisfy his needs, and whose condition is not known to others, so that others may give him something in charity, and who does not beg from people. Okay. This is faqir. So in essence, what we understand from this is a faqir has something, but it's not enough to fulfill their needs. It's not the nisab.
So if you have relatives like back home, that like would you still be giving them priority?
Yeah, they get priority.
Okay. Even though there's local people, right?
Yeah, they get priority because they're your relatives. And when it comes to relatives, it's not like distant, like your dhu rahim, like they're close relatives. Alright, the second is al-masakin. Right, al-masakin is the plural of miskin. A miskin is one who has no wealth at all. A miskin is someone who has no assets whatsoever. So basically, in terms of like financial position or financial condition, a miskin is worse off than a faqir. Make sense?
Why is the faqir mentioned first?
Alright, the third is al-amilin alayha. Al-amilin alayha. Al-amilin is the plural of the word amil. Right, amil is the ismul fa'il from which verb? Amila. Amila ya'malu i'mal fahuwa amilun. Right, now amil is a very, very specific category. The amil is referring to a person appointed by the Islamic head of state or government to collect zakah. So this was an official position. Right? This was an official position that was appointed by the Waliul Amr. Waliul Amr is someone who has authority. And that person would be paid enough to suffice him and in proportion to the amount of work they perform. Make sense? So historically speaking, like during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he would send some companions to different areas within the Arabian Peninsula, like to Bahrain, to Yemen, Sham, to collect what? Zakah, right? And now because they're doing an official, what's the word I'm looking for? Official service, that's taking away from their opportunity to earn, right, and provide for themselves and their families. So in lieu of that, they can receive what? Zakah, right? They can receive zakah. And this is the only category that doesn't matter if they have the nisab or not. It doesn't make a difference because they're being paid for their work.
So in today's time, we would say the salaries only, right?
In today's time, this does not exist because we do not have an Islamic government.
So,
Go ahead.
say if we did have one, so it would be only their salaries, right?
Yeah. Right. So that the argument comes now is that are employees of charity organizations included within this category or not? And that is a huge can of worms that gets opened up. And there are some charity organizations that do make this claim. So what they would do is if they collect zakah, they would take off a certain percentage for their overhead. And their overhead would be to pay their whom? Employees. Right? But the vast, overwhelming majority will say that is not permissible. Right? Charity organizations today cannot be classified as amilina alayha because they're not being appointed by whom? By Islamic State. They're not being appointed by a government. They're not official. They're providing the same service perhaps, but they're not official zakah collectors.
But then they're still doing the part though.
To get on themselves.
Yeah. No one told them. What they count as, the Sharia views them as what we call wakala, wakils. They're agents. So as an agent, they don't have any right to that. They're collecting it and they're distributing it on your behalf.
So this should be completely voluntary.
Any organization that collects zakah should have 100% zakah policy. That 100% of our zakah funds go to whom? The poor. When it comes to sadaqah, that's a different story. For sadaqah, you can take a percentage off the top for your what? Expenses. They can have a fundraiser for their expenses. They can have endowments for their expenses. They can have creative ways for their expenses. Make sense?
Chef, shouldn't this be
I put aminin because that's what's in the verse. Aminina alayha. But if it's raf, yes, it's amilun. Nasab and jar, aminin. Alright, make sense? Now this is something new. Alright, I had never heard until recently that organizations claimed that they were aminina alayha. When I heard this, I was kind of like, what? Everyone had a collective like, what in the world is going on? Right, this is something that just recently came up, and it should be highlighted that, like, the due diligence should come from our part. Like, whoever we're giving our zakat to, we should be the ones vetting them. So if they don't have 100% zakat policy, it's probably a good idea to give it to someone who does. Make sense? All right. Al-mu'allafatu qulubuhum, or in the verse al-mu'allafati qulubuhum, those whose hearts are to be reconciled. Alright, these are people whom the Prophet ﷺ would give zakat to so that they would either accept Islam or new converts who were given zakat to strengthen their iman, to strengthen their faith. And there were three groups of people included within this during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Right, the first is that by giving them financial assistance, it would encourage them to become Muslim so that their people would follow their example and become Muslim as well. Right, there were certain tribes or certain leaders of certain tribes that the Prophet ﷺ would give them some zakah as an incentive for them to come into the fold of Islam. And once they came into the fold of Islam, who would follow? The whole tribe would follow them. Alright, the second was protection against evil and harm. Right, to keep their evil and their harm away, the Prophet ﷺ would give them some what?
Can you give an example?
There are some of the tribes that had enmity and had declared open enmity to the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. The Prophet would give them some money and they would say like, okay, we won't harm you. To keep their harm away.
Oh, but this has nothing to do with converting, right?
No.
Okay.
Just protection against their evil, their harm.
Are these Muslims?
Non-Muslims.
Really?
And the third would be to strengthen people's iman, like new group of converts. Alright, by scholarly consensus, alright, by ijma', this category is no longer applicable. Right, since the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, there was a consensus amongst the companions that this particular category was specific to whose time? The time of the Prophet ﷺ. Even for newcomers, yes.
Why is that?
That was the consensus of the companions.
Since the time of Umar?
Alright, so Uyayna, so it says that Uyayna ibn Hisan al-Aqra ibn Habis and Abbas ibn Mirdas they came and sought their share of zakah from Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, which he had authorized in writing. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh had authorized these individuals to receive zakah during his khilafah. And they brought that authorization in writing to whom? To Umar. Right? So they came to Umar radiallahu anh and showed him the letter. And Umar radiallahu anh, he refused, and he said, this is something the Prophet ﷺ used to give you to reconcile your hearts for Islam. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made Islam needless of you. Islam no longer needs you. If you remain in Islam, that's great. Otherwise, between us and you is the sword. And say the truth is from your Lord. Whosoever wills, let him believe, and whosoever wills, let him disbelieve. Right? وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. You know the truth. You want to believe, believe. You don't want to believe? We got some beef. Right? So they returned to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and said, are you the Khalifa or Umar? You gave us the letter and Umar radiallahu anh refused to give it. He said, he is if Allah wills. He is if Allah wills. Huwa insha'Allah. Basically, Abu Bakr agreed with the position of who? Umar radiallahu anh. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he did not criticize Umar on this matter. And when this came to the knowledge of other companions, did not criticize it, which is considered to be a form of ijma'. So we're going to study, inshallah, when we do usul al-fiqh, that one of the sources of Islamic law, one of the sources of the Sharia is ijma', it's consensus. Right? And consensus can be of two types. There's ijma' of zahir, which is like every person makes their opinion known. Right? And there's something known as ijma' sukuti, where one or two people make their opinion known and no one else does what? Says anything. No one objects to it. No one opposes it or criticizes it. So that's their silence is considered to be approval. Right? So according to all the fuqaha, classically across all four madhahib, they argue that this category has been what? Abrogated. Right? This particular category is abrogated. Now there are some modern day fuqaha that say that no, this category still exists and you can give it to people in order to, if they're like new reverts and new converts, in order to keep them, you can give them some zakah. But we say that no, they're getting zakah because they're fuqara, or anyways, they don't have the what? Nisab. There's a certain organization that uses this to portray a better image of Islam in the media, and they use zakah funds for that, because they're saying they're doing ta'lif al-qulub, and they're like, but this is also...
I was kind of shocked when I read that,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Na'am. Alright. The fifth is ar-riqab. Alright, the fifth category is ar-riqab, and it's specific. It's not referring to all slaves, it's referring to a specific type of slave. So within the Sharia, there are different categories of slaves. Right? For example, there was one known as a mukatab. A mukatab was a slave that had entered into agreement with their owner to purchase their freedom. Right? So for example, Maz owns a slave, and he has an agreement with him that if you pay me $5,000, you're free. So now that slave is working to earn $5,000 to purchase their own what? Freedom. So that is the slave that was eligible to do what? Receive zakah. You can give them zakah to help them purchase their freedom.
Riqab is mukatab.
It's referring to mukatab specifically. Right? Slaves who make an agreement with their owners to be freed if they pay an agreed upon price.
Well, even though this is like irrelevant, but I was just curious. So when you have to work to pay off the money that you owe,
Mm-hmm.
or your get out of the slavery, did that mean that they had to pay, or just work as a slave for a
Pay.
period of time?
They had to pay.
They had to pay, so they would be the slave, and then they would work extra to pay off their slave. Wow.
I mean, they're given permission. If you're a mukatab, the owner would be like, okay, you have permission to go work, to go do tijara and earn, and then from that earning, you're going to pay off your whatever your value is.
So if you own a slave, you don't have to pay.
You had to feed them and clothe them and give them shelter, and basically your expenditures, their expenditures were your responsibility. And
Kid.
huh?
It's like a kid.
Basically. You had to give them food, housing, and shelter. And it had to be the same food that you get, the same clothes that you wore. That's why the word slavery is not perhaps the best translation, because when we think of slavery, we automatically think of, I think of kunta kinte and roots, right? But that wasn't the conceptualization of slavery within Islam. I think Dr. Brown actually just wrote an entire book on it.
August?
Huh? And it's supposed to come out August. A whole book on slavery. I mean, his article for Yaqeen, yeah, he got a lot of heat for it.
I got his YouTube video. That blew up.
But that article is pretty good. Did a good job. Or Mufti Taqi has an article on it as well, like about the whole concept of slavery within Islam, and it's not fair to equate the Western European transatlantic slave to slavery in Islam. They're two completely different realities. Make sense? All right. The sixth category is al-gharimin. Right, al-gharimin. Those in debt. So a person whose debts take them below the nisab. Right, a person whose debts take them below the nisab. Right, the Prophet ﷺ said, begging is not permitted except for three: those living in abject poverty, those with oppressive debt, and those owing a blood money who find it difficult to pay. Which one? Begging. Asking for money. Right, asking others for money is not permitted except for three: those living in abject poverty, right? Those with oppressive debt, and those owing a blood money, yani diya, who find it difficult to pay. So basically, if a person is in so much debt that they don't own the nisab, right, it takes them below the nisab, they are eligible recipients of zakah. So this could be someone with like excessive medical bills, and they can't pay them. You can give them some zakat to help them pay their medical bills. Technically, student loans.
Those hospital bills are still technically considered debt.
That's
So
a huge,
that they can
yeah.
do that.
It's a huge debt.
That's like
It's like one night in the hospital is like $30,000.
Does mortgage come under that as well?
No, I mean mortgage is technically yes, but people that have mortgages are wealthy. They don't qualify.
Is it short-term debt?
Even long term.
Even
Even long term. If a person's in debt, they're eligible recipients of zakah. Alright, and the last one is fi sabilillah. And this is the category that is mostly abused by most organizations, because huh? Oh, after, sorry, yeah. So fi sabilillah is the category that is abused, especially in the modern era, because fi sabilillah linguistically is very general. It's very broad. Because fi sabilillah just means anything that's done for what? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anything can be done for the sake of Allah. But within the context of this verse and this ayah and how it was understood by the companions and those after them, it refers to those fighting, the mujahidun and pilgrims in Hajj. So the mujahidun that are actually on the battlefield, and they need financial assistance to, purchase whatever equipment, weapons, whatever it may be, they are eligible recipients of zakah. Or the Hanafi specifically say a pilgrim who's going to perform Hajj and they run out of money. Right? And they run out of money, you can give them zakat to help them complete their journey.
Wouldn't that kind of be like the Wayfair?
Yeah, similar.
Is there like a system in Saudi for that?
No. No system in Saudi for anything.
They already have to be on their way to
To Hajj? Yeah.
to Hajj. So it's not like, oh, I want to go to Hajj.
Yeah, not like that.
can't be
Like,
intention either.
yeah. It's like they've already started their journey and someone stole their money, right? They lose their wallet and their credit cards and everything, and they don't have access to a bank account. They can get some zakat to help them get back home.
And so for this, the zakat will probably have to be given not during Ramadan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, what the way it's understood is that the treasury would have zakah wealth sitting there, right, to distribute throughout the year. All right. Just to present the other opinion, where it comes from, right? Sheikh Yusuf Qardawi, he has a book called Fiqh al-Zakah, famous book. It's actually a really good book, but he takes some positions that are not the positions of the majority. And one of his positions that fi sabilillah is what? It's open, but he's also not like as general and broad as people make him out to be. So it's important to read. He says, I believe the term fi sabilillah includes fighting and activities that achieve the same goal as fighting. So he says it includes jihad, the mujahidun, but also activities that would achieve the same goal as what? As the mujahidun, which is consistent with the opinion of jurists. It must also be noted that certain activities may be included as fi sabilillah in certain periods in certain countries, which may not be included in other lands or times. So establishing an Islamic school, for example, though beneficial to Muslims, is not included in jihad. Yet in a country whose educational institutions are dominated by secularists, communists, or missionaries, one of the best means of jihad is establishing an Islamic school in order to protect Muslim children from such destructive and demoralizing preaching. Likewise, an Islamic library may sometimes be only a good and beneficial project, but may at other times in other places be a jihad. The same thing may be stated about an Islamic hospital that protects Muslim patients from being exploited by missionary hospitals and other projects that perform similar tasks. So his argument is that if it's a project that fulfills the same objective of jihad, which is to defend Muslims, then you can use it as expansive fi sabilillah. But again, that is a very minority, modern opinion, modern position. Fi sabilillah was always understood to be very specific. Now, the vast majority of organizations, or a lot of them, they take this as a free license to fund whatever they're doing, or to fund whatever they're doing. So, for example, CARE says there's zakat eligible, right? Because what they're doing is defending the rights of whom? Of Muslims, right? And they have a fatwa, they follow the fatwa, fabiha. They're entitled to it, right? They have scholars that have signed off on it. And when we spoke to at least CARE LA, they said that they do try their best to use the zakat funds for those people who come to seek legal assistance and they can't afford to pay for it. The makhraj there's some way out there, right? But others just use it as a very broad license to then fund their, I don't know, whatever. And there's no really accountability. So be careful of who you give your zakat to, basically. Because the whole purpose of zakat is to help whom? The poor and needy, right? That is the main objective, that is the main purpose. And they say that if you analyze all 8 categories, right, the thing that brings all of them together is hajah, that they're all somehow in need of financial assistance. All right, the last one is Ibn Sabil.
One question about zakat. So, you know, for those fuqara and masakin, if you want to pay them zakat, is it going to be like big chunk that you give them?
It can be a big chunk, can be a small. It's up to you. It's up to your discretion.
So in the time of the Prophet or when we had an Islamic state, did the government pay them on a monthly basis, or was it
Need by need. By need.
And is there like a check that you keep? Which person is getting how much, or is it just whatever?
Yeah. Alright, the last one is Ibn Sabil, which is the traveler or the wayfarer. And this refers to a person who's traveling, and despite being wealthy, they are in need during their journey. Right? So, for example, a person is traveling abroad, and again, the example comes that they lose their wallet, they lose their credit cards, they don't have access to a bank, they need to get back home. You can give them zakah, even though back home they might be what? Rich. Alright, and we can choose to give our zakah to one person from any of the above categories, or you can choose to spread it out and give it to whom? Multiple people. And it's important to remember that there has to be a transfer of ownership of the wealth to an individual from one of the above categories. There has to be tamlik, that the wealth is leaving my ownership and entering the ownership of one individual from these categories. And that's one of the main reasons why we can't give zakat to build institutions such as schools and masajid and hospitals, or for general public welfare like fixing roads or bridges, or for sponsoring someone's pilgrimage, etc. Because there has to be a transfer of what? Transfer of ownership. Make sense?
Technically, like, I feel like it all comes back to al-fuqara or al-miskin.
Mhm.
Like, even the latter categories.
There's some sort of faqr or miskin going on there. Yeah. So that's what the fuqaha say, that the thing that brings all these categories together is being in need.
So even the example that you mentioned with like care, providing legal counsel that individuals not afford to provide, or to,
Yeah. So if care were to structure it properly,
yeah.
there'd be no problem. If care was saying that, look, we're collecting zakat specifically for those fuqara that can't afford legal counsel, and we pay for that,
That'd be chill.
that wouldn't be any issue in that. I mean, I'd be okay with that. That's fine.
Cool.
But the problem is that they don't differentiate there's a gas thing.
How about I okay?
So the way we do it is that, again, our zakat scholarship funds goes to those families or those students that are not at the next level of nisab. So there's a process.
Ask
Mhm.
people of their nisab?
So there's a general scholarship fund, then there's a zakat scholarship fund. So the general scholarship fund can be used for anyone. The zakat specifically for those families that don't have nisab.
Also, Ibn Sabid referred to students of knowledge. I don't know if that like.
There's a discussion regarding that, because usually students of knowledge would travel abroad and they wouldn't have access to their wealth and things like that. So some people said that yes, you can use zakat to support students of knowledge. But again, that goes back to them being then fuqara. So for example, the madrasa system in Pakistan, in India, they say it's like the largest NGO in the world, because it's an institution, for example, that has 5,000 students. There's no tuition, there's no room in, like, you don't have to pay for room and board. So they provide food, education, clothes, absolutely free to all the students. And the vast majority of students that come from there are coming from a background of extreme poverty. They're coming from like villages and like whatever. So a lot of these madaris, they run off of sadaqah and zakah. So when a student applies to the madrasa, on the application form it asks, are you eligible to receive zakat or not? So if you say yes, then you sign and you appoint the administration as your agent to collect zakat on your behalf. And you give them the authority to spend that zakat on you then, for your food, for your clothing, for your education.
Can a person receive zakat from multiple people?
For multiple people?
Yeah.
From multiple people?
Like, can they receive zakat multiple times?
Yeah, they can. But if they get above the nisab, then they can't receive any more.
Once their zakat passes the nisab.
Yeah.
So for students, say for instance, the tuition being covered.
Mhm.
The tuition passes the nisab, would that take them out of the?
Yeah, then they can't receive zakat anymore.
So would they have to pay for that?
But then they're paying every month, so they're going to constantly dip below.
And like by the end of the year, they'd be out.
Out.
Money again.
All right. This is the fun stuff. Alright, so those are the 8 categories. Those are known as masarif zakat. Masarif zakat. Alright, who can't we give zakat to? Alright, who can't we give zakat to? Alright, first and foremost, zakat cannot be given to non-Muslims. Alright, zakat specifically is for Muslims. The second is a wealthy person who owns the nisab. We cannot give zakat to our parents or grandparents, even if they're needy. Because if they're needy, it's your responsibility to do what?
Find someone to give them.
No, to take care of them. All right. When it comes to like expenditure, right? When it comes to expenditures, you are responsible obviously for yourself, but you're also responsible for anyone else who's under your care and protection. So your wife, your spouse, your children, right? And anyone else who lives in your household. And if no one else is in your household and your parents are in need, then it's wajib for you to do what? Support your parents. That becomes wajib. That's something that you have to do. And another reason for that is that usually the benefits of wealth between parents and children is shared. So if I'm giving zakat to my parents, I'm going to end up benefiting from that money somehow, because they're going to invite me to dinner and I'm eating that. I'm not supposed to be benefiting from it.
Sheikh, how do we define children here?
Your own children.
As in what age? Up to what age?
Any age. Like if they're your child and they're poor, you can't give them
Even if
zakat.
they're 40 years old.
I mean, if they're minors, they're your responsibility anyways.
Yeah.
Once they're adults, they're not your responsibility financially,
Yeah.
right? But if they're poor, you can't give them zakah, but you can give them sadaqah, you can help them out, whatever.
Sheikh, actually, on the point of children, I've heard, is there a difference opinion on who pays zakat? Whether, even if they're a child, he inherited,
Yes.
$100,000.
So we the Hanafis say that children don't have to pay zakah. I forgot which madhab, I believe it's the Shafi'is. They say that the zakat is not related to the individual, related to the wealth. So if a child owns the nisab or more, they have to pay zakah on it. But we counter argue that no, that zakah is an act of worship, and just like all acts of worship, children are not, but they're not responsible, they're not mukallaf. Make sense? That's a loophole some people use, by the way,
Put in their kids' bank account,
to avoid paying zakah.
savings.
Make a trust for your children, put all the money in there. And then you're the arbiter of the trust. No. Spouse, right? You cannot give zakat to your spouse. You cannot use zakat to pay for a deceased person's shroud. Why?
Because that's a responsibility anyway.
Of the community.
Okay, but why? Technically speaking, let's say the person passed away and they're poor, and they can't afford their funeral costs. Why can't I use zakat funds for that?
It's the right of the person who
Because
died
of death.
that he
Good, because he's getting on it. Because there's no tamlik taking place.
he's what?
Oh,
They're
wow.
dead.
Oh.
There's no tamlik. There's no transfer of ownership.
They can't benefit from it.
Make sense?
Like, benefit.
You can use sadaqah, but not zakah. And it is a communal obligation at that point. If a person passes away and they can't afford for their burial, it's a communal obligation to take care of that. And alhamdulillah, the community, the Muslim community is very generous. Usually if there's a person who passes away and they can't afford it, within hours, the cost gets covered. But it is quite costly to die in America.
How much is it?
It's like $10,000.
Oh my god. Really?
You got to pay for the land. Real estate is not cheap in SoCal. Or you got to get some pay for the mortuary service and the licenses.
Lancaster's pretty cheap.
Lancaster's cheaper. So I think it's a range from 5 to 10. Right? There's a range. So make sure before you die that you leave some money aside. Alright, to pay off a deceased person's debt, you can't use zakah for that. Because again, there's no tamlik. Alright. And then where do we pay our zakah? This is always the question, that should we pay our zakah locally or abroad? Because obviously there's more poverty abroad than there is here, although there's a lot of poverty here in America now. But I mean, in terms of abject poverty, you see it abroad when you go, especially if you go to third world countries. So a lot of people feel that it's more beneficial for them to give their zakah abroad. But the general ruling is that zakah is meant to be spent locally. That every locality should spend their zakah locally, because that is one of the objectives of zakah, is that you are spreading wealth in your own community, and that the rich are taking care of their poor. So generally speaking, it is disliked to pay zakah somewhere else. It's better to give locally. But there are some exceptions to that. And the exception would be if there is more need. Right? If there's more need abroad, or if the person abroad is your relative, right, you can give it to them. And that's why it's preferable to pay zakat to your relatives, starting with the nearest, then one's neighbors, then one's district, then
You can give it to your siblings.
You can give it to your siblings, yes. You can give zakat to your siblings. If they are in need and they don't meet the nisab. Yep.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, you said that you could pay zakat to your siblings. Say your brother or your sister is married,
Mm-hmm.
but their spouse has money, they don't have money.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, you can still pay.
Yeah, because their spouse's money is not theirs.
Not their money.
As long as they don't own the nisab, you can give them zakah. Alright. So that is the end of zakah. It's not too complicated. Next year, inshallah, we'll do it again in Quduri. And in Quduri, mashallah, we'll have some fun reading about camels, livestock, agriculture, and some, there's a section on horses as well.
Very important.
Very important. When technology fails us, we gotta, run out of fossil fuels and oil. We go back to riding camels and horses, inshallah. It'll be a benefit.
57, right?
Huh?
It's on the 57, right?
The fun stuff.
So we're gonna do Hajj next?
Yes, Hajj, inshallah. Al-Hajj. There's one more section on Sadaqat al-Fitr, but we can just stop for today, inshallah. I need some coffee.
If you're coming, yeah?
You and me
Huh?
You're coming, right?
Mm-hmm. After Jumu'ah, after do Jumu'ah in Rancho.
Oh, yeah, good.
But I'll come straight from there, so it's not too far then from the site, inshallah. Are you guys carpooling from here?
Are they giving khutbah over there?
Where?
The blindness at the campsite?
Either Dhuhr or Khutbah, one of the two. You're all going to be traveling, so you can just pray Dhuhr. Or you can have
Sheikh Haidar gives
Exactly. Have Haidar give the Khutbah.